Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Thanks, friends, and welcome to this July 16, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Tonight, our opening story, the BBC's James Reynolds assesses the mood in the Israeli city of Ashkelon.
Gaza is just a few miles to the south there on the horizon. And so far today, there have been 3 rocket warnings from Gaza. Israelis have heard sirens blare across the city. They stop whatever they're doing and they go to find shelter. But for the moment, they've decided here to carry on their lives. And I want to show you inside this shopping center. Have a look there at the security guard. Shalom.
Hi.
In all Israeli shopping centers, there's a security guard because for years the threat here was from suicide bombers. Now the threat is from rockets. And if you look in here, you can see it's pretty empty. People here say it's much emptier than normal, but they're continuing to follow news of the conflict from Gaza. How is the offensive into Gaza affecting your life?
Since I was a little boy, I remember when I woke up to the alarms in the nights and in the mornings. It was very, very annoying and scary. And
are you scared now?
Now less, because I got used to it. But I see the people and I see the look on their faces, and it's gotta stop.
I'm not afraid. I get used to that, but a little bit. I'm more sad than that this is my reality.
Do you see this ending?
I don't know if it's supposed to be end.
That it will carry on?
I don't know, because there is 2 sides and I'm sad for 2 sides. But I don't think that it's going to be end.
What should Israel do?
I think that we need to go till the end. Not because I want all the Arabs be killed. It's very hard to make one decision because no matter what we took, everyone judging us, okay? American judging us, all the states judging us because they don't know this place to be a country that being attacked by all the Arabs.
I think and I believe in all my heart that it will be peace. Only if people talk together and want to do it. All the children, all the people have children, and they must to do the peace.
Israelis here in Ashkelon await word from their government about the future of the offensive into Gaza. Some ministers have called for a ground operation. The decision, one way or another, will be made by the entire security cabinet. James Reynolds, BBC News, Ashkelon.
4 children were killed in an Israeli strike on a beach near Gaza City. As Lise Doucette reports, Hamas and Israel have both agreed to respect a 5-hour ceasefire in Gaza after 9 days of fighting. The Israeli military said it would stop fighting from 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to 1500, 3 o'clock in the afternoon is Israel time, tomorrow, Thursday, to allow residents in Gaza to stock up on supplies. A Hamas spokesman confirmed that his group would also stop rocket attacks in that time. Officials in Gaza say that Israeli raids have now left 220 Palestinians dead. Hamas rockets attacks have killed 1 Israeli. An Israeli army officer told BBC Arabic that the ceasefire had been requested by the UN and other international organizations. An Israeli military statement warned that Israel would respond firmly and decisively should Hamas launch attacks during the ceasefire window. Here now is Lise Doucette with this report on the ceasefire and the 4 young children that were killed on the beach today.
Following report contains some disturbing images.
An Israeli warplane hit a naval container in Gaza's port today. Some children ran for cover. Then a second strike almost immediately. These children didn't escape. Emergency services rushed the bodies away. Some are so charred, they're too gruesome to show. It's not clear what the target was at this port.
Israel insists it only targets the infrastructure used by Hamas, terror targets as it calls them. Now, previously it hit this post. It was used by the Hamas naval police to control the fishermen. But the boats aren't going out to sea because Israel controls this coastline. So we're told that the children who were here were all children of fishermen, scavenging for metal to try to support their families.
4 boys aged 9 to 11 died in the 2 attacks, all from the same extended family. They were buried together within hours. 9 days into this crisis, the death toll in Gaza is now at least 220. In Israel, there was also a funeral today, its first death in this conflict. Dror Hanin was killed by a mortar. Israel says its Iron Dome intercepts many of the missiles fired from Gaza, but nearly 1,000 have hit Israel so far. It blames Hamas for this continuing violence.
Hamas thus shut the door to a diplomatic solution, and it therefore bears the sole responsibility for the continuation of the violence. It's responsible for the civilian deaths, the innocent deaths of Palestinians that it uses as human shields, and it's responsible for the deaths of Israeli civilians and the terror rocketing of Israeli civilians.
I asked one Hamas official who's not in hiding why they didn't accept a ceasefire proposed by Egypt.
Whenever anyone want to go to be a mediator, at least you should be between this and this. But what we saw in it, we saw only what the Israelis want from us, but we didn't see anything from what the Palestinians want from the Israelis.
So many asking, what does Hamas want?
What we're looking for is normal rights. We're talking about lifting the siege, opening the borders.
Where do I seek revenge, wails this man who lost 4 boys from his family today. Both sides say they want an end to this military escalation, but they're still dangerously far apart. Lise Doucette, BBC News, Gaza.
Strong winds knocked out power and forced thousands of people to evacuate as a typhoon hit the central Philippines. So a little activity today, friends, from the 4th seal of Revelation, the pale horse whose rider is named Death. Let me pull this slide forward. Alongside whom rides Hades, hell, the grave. And the characteristics, the actualities, the eventualities of this horse as described in plain language by Jesus Christ in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21 are loimos, meaning disease epidemics, pestilences, the plagues of Egypt, these things primarily. But Jesus Christ also said between the 3rd seal and the beginning of the 5th seal there would be seismos, a lot of seismic activity, commotions in the air, gale force winds of all kinds, commotions on the ground, earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, wildfires, flooding, and terake, trouble, literally troubled waters, but figuratively mob seditions, trouble that leads up to the mega trouble that leads to the great tribulation of the 5th seal, but not that troubled yet. But in the way of the seismos, the seismic activity, the typhoon in the Philippines, also known as Glinda, struck the main island of Luzon with gusts of up to 115 miles per hour, 185 kilometers per hour. Authorities said at least 10 people had been killed by the storm. That puts it, friends, in the category of the pale horse whose rider is named Death. Again, 10 people have been killed by this storm. And Barasan Etherajan reports.
The devastation became clearer soon after Typhoon Rammasun passed Manila Bay. Ferocious winds have toppled trees and power lines, bringing life to a standstill in Manila. Government offices and schools were closed across the city. People in shanty towns were the worst affected. Many tin roof houses were blown away. Emergency services were trying to rescue people trapped by fallen debris in other parts of the country. Several people died from electrocution and when walls collapsed. The Philippines is hit by around 20 storms a year. Typhoon Rammasun is the first to make a landfall this year. More than 350,000 people from high-risk areas have been moved to emergency shelters. Aid agencies say the timely evacuation has helped to reduce casualties. Parts of the Philippines are still recovering from Typhoon Haiyan that devastated the country last year, killing more than 6,000 people. After crossing the Philippines, Rammasun, now categorized as a storm, is heading towards the South China Sea. It is expected to gain in strength once it's back out at sea. Anbaras Nithirajan, BBC News.
The ancient town, or Chinese town of Fenghuang, has been submerged in water. Very similar situation to what the effects of the typhoon that the people, the Filipinos in the Philippines are suffering. But Fenghuang has been submerged in water after severe storms battered this Chinese region. More than 50,000 people have been forced to leave their homes and amid power cuts and flooding. Fenghuang is currently being considered for UNESCO World Heritage status, as you'll hear Claire Brennan say in this video report.
Perilous balancing act to cross raging floodwaters in central China. This soldier braved treacherous conditions to save trapped residents in the ancient town of Fenghuang, which has been battered by severe storms in recent days. More than 50,000 people have been forced to leave their homes and wade through muddy waters to reach safety. The 300-year-old town was the site of the Ming Dynasty's southern Great Wall, built to protect China from Mao invaders. It's currently under consideration for UNESCO World Heritage status. But with more storms due in the coming hours, there are fears this region's unique history could be washed away. Claire Brennan, BBC News.
Okay, friends, and that typhoon out of the Philippines, we heard in that video report that it was headed toward the South China Seas. And there's a report today from the South China Seas related to China and Vietnam. China will move an oil rig away from disputed waters near the Vietnamese coast, and it could diffuse tensions between those two countries. When the rig was stationed in the sea that is claimed by both Vietnam and China at the beginning of May, anti-China protests and riots erupted in Vietnam. The BBC's Nag Pham reports from on board a Vietnamese Coast Guard vessel following the move of the rig.
The Vietnamese Coast Guard has brought us here to witness the Chinese oil rig. And yesterday our ship was approaching it. I could see a large number of Chinese vessels, and we were told that they were protecting the rig. But they seem to have disappeared overnight, and this morning the sea looks almost empty. I could only see a couple of Vietnamese fishery boats near our ship. We were told that almost all the Chinese ships have moved up north towards the Hainan Island, and only about a dozen remain. Now, it's very difficult to know what is the real motive behind the decision to move the oil rig. But for the moment, it will help ease the tension between the two neighbors. Vietnam and China both claim sovereignty over the Palestine islands and the adjacent waters. And both countries are not prepared to give up their claims. And so the choppy waters in the South China Sea will remain a flashpoint, perhaps for a very long time.
And friends, news from related to Russia and the Ukraine. Next, Russia's Ministry of Defense has shown journalists what it says is the aftermath of a shell attack on its soil on Sunday, which killed one man. Ukraine denies any involvement in the attack. The dispute is part of the information war between the two countries trying to blame each other for the fighting. Daniel Sanford reports from the Russian side of the border.
With us on the trip are a group of military attachés from Moscow who've been brought down by the Ministry of Defence to see the aftermath of what appears to have been a shell that came across the border from Ukraine on Sunday morning.
The owner of this house died, male,
68 года рождения.
1968 year old.
The shell landed in a yard of a small country house, and the military attachés from Europe and from Asia have been brought all the way here from Moscow, a 2-hour flight and another 2-hour drive, to see where the shell landed and the house where somebody died. In the settlement I found Viktor Nekrasov, who said he'd known the man who died since he was a boy. His own sister was also injured in the shelling. We can't go on like this, he told me. It's terrifying. Everyone faces their own fate, but we're just country folk. We're not to blame for this, it's the politicians. And it all began with the Maidan in Kiev. Some other shells landed here just a couple of dozen metres away, and again the military attachés from Moscow are being shown around. It's all part of the information war that's being fought between the Russian government and the Ukrainian government, each trying to put the blame on the other for the fighting. The Ukrainians absolutely deny that the shells that came over the border came from their forces. The Russians, on the other hand, insist that they have been the victims of an artillery attack from the Ukrainian side.
The best way to prevent something like a shell going across a border is to stop the source of the violence. The violence is in Ukraine, and the violence is really at this point because of the separatists who are unwilling to accept a ceasefire that President Poroshenko has proposed. The other way to stop the violence is to prevent the resources that feed the fight.
And as we spoke, there was a steady stream of refugees coming across the frontier, fleeing the fighting in eastern Ukraine. Daniel Sanford, BBC News, on the Russian-Ukrainian border.
And friends, Alpa Patel also has a report from the Ukraine today about rockets that were fired from a warplane that struck the town of Snizhne in Donetsk, the Donetsk region, around 7 o'clock this morning, their time, 4 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. That would have been, actually, Greenwich Mean Time 4, that would have been Tuesday, hitting a block of flats and a tax office.
Digging for survivors, volunteers sift through the rubble for any signs of life. On Tuesday, this apartment building in the rebel-held town of Snizhne was hit by an airstrike. The attack killed at least 11 people and made many more homeless. The war of words over who carried out the attack has already begun. This rebel commander points the finger of blame at government forces.
Many local citizens have seen the plane that dropped the bomb. It had Ukrainian markings on it. Why would Ukraine bomb its own territory? It is hard for me to say.
But a government spokesman has not only denied the accusation, but described it as a cynical provocation. He added that all flights by government warplanes had been suspended after one of its military aircrafts was shot down on Monday. The government have blamed the rebels for the attack, claiming the plane was shot down by a rocket fired from the Russian border. Meanwhile, the fighting on the ground between pro-Russian separatists and the Ukrainian army continues to leave its scars. The violence has driven tens of thousands from their homes. The Ukrainian government, along with the United States and the European Union, blame Russia for arming the separatists, a claim that has been consistently denied by Moscow. On the ground, the ongoing violence is undermining the prospect of peace in the east and is fueling the misery and pain of those trapped in the middle. Alpa Bitel, BBC News.
Friends, in news from Syria today, Bashar al-Assad has been sworn in for a third 7-year term as president of Syria after an election last month that opponents dismissed as a farce. He has defied calls to step down since an uprising that's claimed thousands of lives began in March 2011. State television broadcast today what it said was a live ceremony from the presidential palace in Damascus, as Lena Sinjab reports.
It's a military parade that he started with. When this is the first time we see this during an oath, this is a message of defiance. The way he was walking in towards the ceremony, he was very confident in his walk. This is also a message to say that he is the leader of the army that is controlling the situation. He on the ground, the government is winning big time because of the support of Iran, of Russia, and Hezbollah as well, and the weakness of the opposition that are fragmented and lacking any support. But I have to say as well, there is also a state of denial of what's happening. He's still calling those who are living inside Syria as the free Syrians, while every single day we're still hearing about people in Syria being detained, in thousands of them, and every day there are cases of people who are being killed under torture inside prison only because of words they have said, maybe because of a Facebook status. And the war is still ongoing with shelling, the government shelling areas under rebel control where civilians are being attacked.
And friends, we'll wrap up news tonight out of related to Iraq. Inside recaptured Iraq town of Balad, Sunni militias have joined forces with Shiite militias have joined forces with Iraqi government troops to recapture the town of Balad, north of Baghdad. The army lost control of the town about a month ago, but boosted by Iraqi Hezbollah fighters, they have retaken it from the Sunni militants. The conflict has seen some traditional alliances shift, with Hezbollah traditionally anti-American, but you'll see in this video how they're now fighting on the same side. Mark Dole reports from Balad.
Armies march on their stomachs, and these Iraqi government soldiers are no exception. We're with a sort of military Meals on Wheels service.
How many people do you feed?
Yes, 2,000. Yet now.
Volunteers proudly showed us what they had.
Meeting kebab Iraqi. Kebab Iraqi. Yes?
The jihadist insurgents are from the Sunni branch of Islam. The Shiites, on the government side, are a mixed bunch. The regular army lost parts of this town of Balad about a month ago, but with the crucial help of Shiite militias, it has now taken back control. One man left a comfortable life in Europe to take up arms.
I left my home and family in Sweden to save Iraq.
The most powerful fighters on this side of the line, more powerful in this town than the Iraqi army, are from the Iraqi Hezbollah. That's the Iraq branch of the international Shiite Hezbollah army, backed by neighbouring Iran.
This is a conflict which has thrown traditional alliances into the melting pot. Here we are at a military checkpoint of Hezbollah, the party of God. Traditionally against the Americans, they're now fighting in Iraq on the same side.
The fight to take back Balad was clearly fierce.
This mosque is supposed to be for prayers, but they took it to kill people. Now we are securing the whole area.
How far is the front line now? How many kilometers away from here?
It's about 4 kilometers from here. It's in the area in front of us.
The residents we met welcomed the reinforcements from the Iraqi army and the militias.
It's pretty quiet here now, it's the middle of the day, but there's clearly more economic activity, more normal life, if you like, than there was here a week ago. And that's coincided with the arrival here of reinforcements from the Iraqi army and Hezbollah. Nevertheless, the front line is still only a few kilometers away.
The fighters have been fed. Spirits are high in the centre of Balad. But the jihadists are still in control in other areas and could try to return here. Mark Doyle, BBC News, Balad.
And friends, that's it for this Wednesday night report. Tomorrow night, God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back with more news from the current day related to the Bible and prophecy. And I hope tomorrow night to be able to share with you some lighter stories, even some news on Sunday's World Cup and the big win for Germany out of Brazil, and yet give you some analysis, too, as to how and why that may have some impact on what happens in these latter days out of the EU and what we can expect out of Germany. Hopefully we can get to that tomorrow night. Thanks for joining me tonight, friends. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.